Caiden Cowger. Somebody had to say it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to the Caiden Cowger program, broadcasting from West Virginia. It is great to have you with us. So, Neil Gorsuch, now a Supreme Court justice. He was confirmed by the Senate on Friday, and I tell you, absolutely terrific. We have another originalist on the court rather than somebody that just reiterates liberal policy. Fantastic. And of course, liberals are very upset by it because they want someone who is a lot like them, who twists the Constitution like they twist the words of their opponents. That's exactly what they wanted. And guess what? They didn't get it. So really just absolutely fantastic. Now we have Neil Gorsuch on there. Have the article from foxnews.com. I'll go ahead and read it for you. But as you know, liberals were fighting this all the way. They were viewing this as being a stolen seat because they did not confirm Obama's appointed nominee. So it's really has liberals in a massive temper tantrum right now because Republicans ended up enacting the nuclear option, making it so a simple Senate majority would confirm the Supreme Court justice. So go ahead and read this for you. It's from foxnews.com. The Senate confirmed Judge Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court on Friday, filling the critical 9th seat that has been vacant for over a year and basically capping a huge debate that saw Republicans overhaul the way the chamber operates in order to overcome what they described as an unprecedented Democratic filibuster. The 54 to 45 vote, it was a 54 to 45 vote, in which 3 Democrats crossed party lines to support the appeals court justice, is expected to restore a 5-4 conservative tilt on the bench. And I always hate that phrase, that it's a 5-4 conservative tilt, because what happened is that they're referring to Justice Kennedy and Anthony Kennedy. And the thing is that Kennedy was appointed by Ronald Reagan, yes, but he was appointed as a second option because Reagan had a Democratic legislative branch. So he had to appoint a more so liberal justice that, may have some Republican leanings or some conservative leanings, but quite liberal on a lot of issues. So I really don't think that it is a conservative tilt. I don't think that Anthony Kennedy is a conservative. I think he's more of a moderate. So I think that it's more of it has a liberal tilt on some things. But he's not going to be in there for forever, and hopefully Trump will be able to appoint another Supreme Court justice on there. But the thing is, that's also important to point out here, is that because Republicans implemented this nuclear option, if someone who is a liberal on the court leaves, what that will then mean is that Trump has full ability to nominate the most conservative justice that he can find, because we have the House, we have the Senate. So all that means is that if Trump appoints or nominates a conservative justice, an overwhelmingly conservative justice to the court, he'll be able to pass it and put him through just like that, very quickly, because all that they need is a simple majority now. We don't have to try to woo Democrats. So Democrats basically did that to themselves. Neil Gorsuch was fully qualified for the position. He is fully qualified for the position, and he's made it perfectly clear that his political affiliations or political beliefs or opinions do not reflect that of which he holds pertaining to interpreting the Constitution, because his interpretation of the Constitution is based upon the meaning behind the document. And we'll be getting to that here in a minute. He follows the belief system of constitutional interpretation called originalism, which a lot of liberals have a hard time understanding. So we're going to be getting to that in just a little bit. You don't want to miss that. But anyway, continue reading this here from Fox News. Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, a Republican from Kentucky, said that he's going to make the American people proud. Donald Trump congratulated him, saying congratulations to an exceptionally qualified and respected judge on his confirmation to the Supreme Court. Republicans, a lot of Gorsuch as an overwhelmingly qualified jurist and a fitting successor to Scalia. But Democrats accused him of giving evasive answers to his confirmation hearing. They claimed that his past rulings showed a tendency to favor business interests over workers. More broadly, Democrats remain furious that Republicans under McConnell's leadership blocked consideration of former President Barack Obama's nominee, in turn allowing Trump to nominate Gorsuch. So see, that's what I'm talking about there. They were viewing that as being a stolen seat. Now, here's the thing. If the Democrats would have successfully appointed their nominee to the Supreme Court, in my opinion, that would be a stolen seat, because that seat was formerly occupied by Antonin Scalia, one of the most conservative justices serving on the court in the modern day. Okay, so no, that would have been a stolen seat had Obama got his way and replaced Antonin Scalia's seat with a progressive liberal. That would have been an embarrassment. Scalia would have rolled in his grave had he known that his seat is now occupied by a liberal that interprets the Constitution very loosely and doesn't take any consideration of the original meaning behind the words, the original intent, the founding principles, none of that. Scalia would roll in his grave. So no, it's not a stolen seat, Democrats. You keep whining and telling yourselves that, you mentally retarded people. Because Scalia occupied that seat. He's overwhelmingly conservative. So that would have been stolen had Obama's nominee been appointed. Not because Donald Trump appointed Neil Gorsuch. Now, here's the thing. That's the way that the court system works. Had Democrats been placed in that position where we would be having this election coming up, they would have blocked the president's Supreme Court appointee too, had it been a Republican presently at the time occupying the White House. Okay, so really what you're seeing is basically a political game that is being played in Washington, D.C., where Democrats are being hypocrites, in so many words, because had they been in that position, they would have done the same exact thing. As a matter of fact, they had done that before. They I believe they did that with President George W. Bush. So that's the thing. It's absolutely pathetic. Absolutely ridiculous, but that's what the Democrats do. And when you give them a taste of their own medicine, they can't stand it. That's why Trump is so hated by the left. Trump has been giving them a taste of their own medicine. He's been punching them in the nose because they've been punching us in the nose for several years, and Republican politicians have, rather than defending themselves, just say, oh, no, don't do that again. They are complicit with liberalism, even though they are not in agreement with it. And that is something that Republicans have had to overcome, and had it not been for Donald Trump, that may have never happened. Because one thing that I've been witnessing is that not only are Republicans in legislative bodies becoming even more bold since Trump's nomination and since Trump's winning the presidency, obtaining the presidency, but also conservative commentators are becoming even more so bold. Okay, and that's something that's really great. A lot of younger people I'm starting to see become bold as well, speaking forth their political opinions, getting their voices out there. And I'm not talking about your wishy-washy traditional, hey, I'm a Republican, although I have all the values of a Democrat. I'm talking about young people that actually have core convictions, that actually have core principles that lead them to conservatism. Okay, and even people that are predominantly based and rooted in conservatism, even though they might have some libertarian principles, and they might be considered more libertarian or conservatarian than conservative, they're still a right of center voice, and that's something that is quite fascinating because they aren't necessarily claiming to be conservative, but they are professing to be right of center. And as long as you are not claiming to be something that you're not, I'm fine with it. It's just if you're socially liberal and you're, identifying as being a conservative, no, that's when I have a problem because you're identifying as something that you're not. You're maybe a conservatarian, maybe you're a libertarian, but as for being a conservative, no. Now, I'll stand with you on the issues that we agree upon, but trying to say that, trying to make something that you're not is what I have a problem with when that type of stuff arises. But anyway, getting back to what we're talking about here with Gorsuch, it's really, before I go on, and I'll just say this. If you have a mix of liberal opinions and conservative opinions, it doesn't mean you're conservative, it means you're moderate. And that's something else but I just had to add that in there because it's almost like to a certain degree we're acting like moderates don't exist anymore. But that's a whole nother issue. But getting back on topic here, about Gorsuch, liberals are overwhelmingly upset about this. They are upset that Gorsuch was placed upon the Supreme Court. They can't take it. And you had a few Democrats that did, in fact, vote in favor of Gorsuch. You had Donnelly from Indiana. You had Heatkamp, I think Heatkamp, something like that, from North Dakota. And you had Joe Manchin from West Virginia. And we all know why good old Joe voted in support of Gorsuch. It's because all 55 counties in his state voted for Trump. So if he would be the vote from West Virginia that is against Gorsuch's nomination, that would mean that, he would be getting elected out of office, very shortly. So he's trying his best to portray himself as being a pro-Trump Democrat, although we all know that he campaigned for Hillary Clinton. He's the most pro-gun, or I'll put this, take that back. He's the most anti-gun candidate, that is running for West Virginia office, I think, at this time. And he's the most anti-gun candidate, predominantly in the Senate, because he, created one of the most liberal gun control bills. And it was so liberal that even his own Democratic colleagues couldn't vote for it. So, you consider all that and all the stuff that he's done, lying to, West Virginians about, promising to defend our Second Amendment rights, and then voted not to do so by creating one of the most liberal gun control bills in the Senate, said he would repeal Obamacare, and then he didn't. I can go on and on and on about the entire thing, that, Manchin has done to West Virginia, but I think you get the point. But anyway, I want to talk a little bit about originalism. And don't have a whole lot of time to cover it in this segment, but we will be getting to that after the break. But I was reading an article, actually I think it was a letter to the Boston Globe, and it had quite a few reads. It was enough to, I'm pretty sure it made the headline of Drudge Report for a while. But the letter was "Originalism is Unconstitutional." And it's basically a one-paragraph thing of this guy professing. His name's Julian Braxton in Boston. And he was professing that originalism is unconstitutional. Now, the reason why I want to focus on this a little bit is because this is a belief system that is predominantly held by Democrats, by liberals. They believe that originalism is outdated, that originalism doesn't make sense, that originalism should not be interpreted or considered when interpreting the Constitution. And that's something that we really need to talk about and that we really need to focus on. So I want to talk about that as we get back from the break, because there's a lot of misconceptions about it, a lack of understanding about what originalism is, and hopefully I'll be able to clarify that for you, especially if there are any of you who are liberals out there. Because in my opinion, and the way that I think, and actually the way that it should be, my opinion is that important on this, originalism is simply a correct interpretation. If I read a book, and I'm talking about all of this stuff that does not exist in that book, I would get an F in my language arts class. I would get an F in English. Okay? If I am reading a book called 1984, and I start talking about all of these dinosaurs in the book, I would get an F in my summary. Why? Because it was an incorrect interpretation. I was putting stuff in my summary that did not exist. That's exactly what happens if you do not have an originalist justice. But we'll be getting to that a little bit more as we return.
Fighting liberalism one lie at a time.
You're listening to Caiden Cowger on the WCNR News Network.
Caiden Cowger. Somebody had to say it.
How would you love to use a software that can boost startups and growth? You can get more customers, sell more, spend less, and understand accounting language with this ultimate all-in-one inbound marketing and management software for your small business. Join the crowdfunding campaign. Just visit appy.la and see why this program is a must. For just $97, you can get lifetime access to our complete business software. Join today at appy.la. That's appy.la.
It safely eliminates stress and anxiety. It makes commuting, driving your kids around, or driving a truck more fun. It makes gift shopping easier. It's Happy Driving Stress Reduction, a revolutionary patent-pending tool that works while you drive. Find Happy Driving Stress Reduction on iTunes, Amazon, or Google Play. Make life easier. Buy Happy Driving Stress Reduction today.
Go get your copy of Prelude to World War III, The Rise of Islamic Republic and the Rebirth of America. World War III Series Volume 1, available in paperback and Kindle edition on Amazon by the authors James Rozone and Miranda Watson. By the 2020s, America was no longer a world superpower. The military had been cut to a bare-bones level, and while the U.S. was focused internally, the door opened for new powers to emerge on the world stage. In the wake of this power vacuum, China.
Hi, I'm George Foreman. Do you have an idea for a new product or invention? People ask me all the time, George, how do I get my idea in front of companies? How do I get a patent? What do I do next? Do you have the same questions? I'll tell you like I'll tell them all. Call my friends at InventHelp.
Call InventHelp today for free information. InventHelp can submit your invention to companies who are interested in receiving new ideas.
For your free inventor's information, call 1-800-441-7922. That's 1-800-441-7922.
Goldman Sachs and HSBC recently purchased 7.1 tons of physical gold. What do these bankers and mega money managers know that you don't? They're expecting the value of gold and silver to increase. That's why you need our friends at Capital Gold Group. Capital Gold Group offers gold and silver for direct delivery and will not be undersold. Call now. Call 1-800-932-4108. That is 1-800-932-4108. All right, guys, let me tell you about our friends at Capital Gold Group. Capital Gold Group is a company that deals with investing in precious metals such as gold and silver. They've been in business for over a decade and have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. They've been featured on Fox News, Market Watch, Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal, CNBC, Reuters, Fox Business, Financial Times, and Forbes magazine. If you're interested, you can call at 1-800-932-4108. That is 1-800-932-4108. They also offer various ebooks on investing in gold, such as the Definitive Gold Guide. So once again, if you're interested, you can call 1-800-932-4108. That's 1-800-932-4108. All right, guys, let me tell you about our friends at the Debt Ninja. The Debt Ninja is a company that specializes in slashing debt. They deal with various debt problems such as tax debt, debt settlement, debt consolidation, student loan debt, credit repair services, and bankruptcy. That is 1-800-826-1132. Now, their company, the Debt Ninja, operates on a national level and have worked to fight the IRS for many of their clients. If you're interested, you can call at 1-800-826-1132. That is 1-800-826-1132. Once again, that is 1-800-826-1132. Due to a decline in the economy and major car companies filing for bankruptcy, American Auto Protection has announced an extended service plan that is now available to the general public. This plan reduces the cost of auto repair expenses. Maximum Car Care was created to assist qualifying car owners with lowering repair bills of cars under 130,000 miles and under 12 years old. Maximum Car Care works to limit the expense of auto repair bills, roadside assistance, rental coverage, and towing. Their number is 1-800-824-9762. That is 1-800-824-9762. Once again, that is 1-800-824-9762. Maximum Car Care is a proud sponsor of the Caiden Cowger program.
You're listening to the WCNR News Network.
Caiden Cowger. Somebody had to say it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Caiden Cowger program. It is great to have you with us. So I want to talk to you a little bit about originalism. Okay, there was an article that I was reading in the Boston Globe. It was actually a letter sent in by Julian Braxton, and had quite a few reads. And the letter was titled, "Originalism is Unconstitutional." Now, the reason why I want to bring this up, because I realize it's just a letter, but the reason why I want to bring this up is because it represents a core of the liberal ideologues believing that originalism is unconstitutional. I've actually heard that by some of my peers, and it is so absolutely lacking in an understanding of the Constitution and of the role of the Supreme Court. And that's what I am going to try to explain to you here. I'll go ahead and read this letter for you. It says, "It is hard to believe that we are still debating the merits of originalism. Indeed, as Mary Sarah Bilder points out, originalism is not constitutionalism. Constitutionalism must be about trying to figure out how to live up to the highest ideals of liberty and justice, and not about trying to figure out the potential limits of those liberties embodied in a constitution created by some deeply flawed men. Simply put, constitutionalism must be about including everyone, and this is something the framers had no capacity to envision." Well, in that case, Julian, what you're advocating for is no Supreme Court and no Constitution. Because if you view the Constitution as being nothing more than an opinion presented by the framers and does not hold any real value, then therefore why is it needed? Because what you are advocating for is the Supreme Court to basically turn into a court system solely that operates on the basis of enacting liberalism. And that's really what liberals want. Because here's the problem. There are numerous articles out there about actually that hold different opinions about why originalism is not relevant. There was an opinion written in the New York Times. It was titled "The Problems with Originalism." And they wrote this. This was an opinion piece written by Ken Levy. And here's what it said. "The founders would no doubt sympathize because they used flexible, open-ended language, for example, like cruel and unusual, without explaining exactly what they meant. It seems clear that they were deliberately inviting future generations to interpret and reinterpret these words, the very opposite of what textualists and originalists propose." No, here's the thing. The founders, when they said cruel and unusual, what can we insinuate from that? Okay, well, let's look at the tortures, the professional torturers of England at the time, where they would, all of you have watched Braveheart, that's pretty accurate, where they take torture devices, they rip you open, and they begin to gut you like a pig. That would be considered cruel and unusual punishment that the founders would be referring to, not simply putting a cloth over your face and then pouring water. Okay, that's not cruel and unusual punishment. You're not dying. Even the death penalty is debated by liberals as being unconstitutional, as being cruel and unusual. But the thing is that the Constitution says that the penalty for treason is capital punishment, death. Okay, so capital punishment is in the Constitution, meaning that, no, capital punishment is not unconstitutional. It is in the Constitution. So it's not cruel and unusual. And that's the thing. A lot of these liberals are unable to comprehend logic when it comes to constitutionality. So anyway, getting back to what the article said, it said the founders were not dummies. They knew that society would evolve in unforeseeable ways, morally, socially, politically, technologically. Now, here's the thing. If the society evolved so much that it would require the Constitution to change, it's not the role of the Supreme Court to change the Constitution. And clearly, because it's not listed as being the role of the Supreme Court in the Constitution. If there is a societal change, such as when people began to oppose slavery and supported the abolition of slaves. It required a legislatively passed constitutional amendment to make slavery illegal. They passed an amendment. That was not the role of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court had to interpret the Constitution as was written. If a slave is viewed as being 3/5 a person, regardless of how the justices feel about it, that's what the Constitution said. So what it required was for moral men serving in the legislative branch to pass a constitutional amendment banning slavery. And that's what they did. And that's how slavery was banned. Not because of the role of the court, but by the role of the legislative branch. Now, here's another thing. George Washington opposed slavery. Washington said that there is not a man, he said, I can only say that there is not a man living who wishes more sincerely than I do to see a plan adopted for the abolition of slavery. But the reason why he did not support it at that exact time is because he believed that it would cause too much division. And at the early founding of a nation, they did not need division because what would end up taking place, as we all found out, would be a civil war. So had the nation in its early founding been in the middle of a civil war right when they're getting established, it would have provided a wonderful opportunity for Great Britain to come in and take over again. That is the reason why he didn't support it at that time period. They needed unity, regardless of how immoral some of the population was. Washington was known to free slaves, although he did have some himself. But as records show, he treated them a lot differently than other people, more humane. But the thing is that at one point in time, and this is another thing that you have to consider with Washington, is that he was raised believing that slavery was okay. He was raised believing that slavery was fine. But what ended up happening, as records show, as his letters show, is that his opinion of it began to evolve. And that's something very significant, especially for the time period. George Washington, being a great man that he was, his opinion on it began to evolve. He began supporting it because he was raised to support it, to being moderate on it, to this is wrong and it needs to be eventually abolished. So what they did is that and many of the founders used language like this in opposing slavery. A lot of times slaves would become like members of the family. However, slavery was immoral, of course, as we all know. In no way would I ever condone such a thing like that. Disgusting. But the thing is that you did have some people at that time period that treated their slaves more humanely than others. For example, even though you did have some beatings that took place with Thomas Jefferson, depending on different letters, Jefferson tried to institute on his plantation a different way of dealing with slaves. Rather than beating them, he had giving them tips as an incentive. So in other words, providing them with incentives to work and do good work rather than, beating them if they didn't. So, but there was one guy in particular that Jefferson had hired that was known for beating slaves, and that was I'd have to research that again because I don't believe that anything came of that eventually. But he had written in his letter, one of the letters before he died, that he wanted his slaves to be well cared for, but wanted them to be set free. So that was just a little bit of interesting things about the founders, because the founders did not hold the beliefs that we do today, where slavery is immoral, slavery is disgusting, slavery is wrong. Martin Luther King, his belief that we are to judge not by the color of somebody's skin, but by the content of their character, comes from the Word of God, where Jesus instructed us not to judge by the appearance, but judge righteous judgment. So that's what you have to consider there, the beliefs of the founders. But the founders, many of the head founders opposed slavery, and it is believed that they set up a system so where there would be an amendment process where you could look over the Constitution every so many amount of years. And if you feel that there is a need for a change to take place in the Constitution, such as the abolition of slavery, then there's an amendment process to do so. But the societal changes are not meant to be conducted by the Supreme Court.
Some say he's the next Rush Limbaugh.
I tell you, this kid's got 90% of Rush's venom with only 10% of the biomass.
You're listening to Caiden Cowger on the WCNR News Network.
Caiden Cowger.
Somebody had to say it.
You always want to look your best, but you don't always have time to deal with a necktie that won't cooperate. That's where we come in. Introducing the Never Tie, the only necktie that you never have to tie. Each Never Tie comes with a tie and 2 removable knots that you simply slide on and adjust for your comfort, giving you the perfect look every time. Choose from over 20 stylish designs at thenevertie.com. Enter promo code RADIO1 for discount.
It safely eliminates stress and anxiety. It makes commuting, driving your kids around, or driving a truck more fun. It makes gift shopping easier. It's Happy Driving Stress Reduction, a revolutionary patent-pending tool that works while you drive. Find Happy Driving Stress Reduction on iTunes, Amazon, or Google Play. Make life easier. Buy Happy Driving Stress Reduction today.
Go get your copy of Prelude to World War III, The Rise of Islamic Republic and the Rebirth of America. World War III Series Volume 1, available in paperback and Kindle edition on Amazon by the authors James Rozone and Miranda Watson. By the 2020s, America was no longer a world superpower. The military had been cut to a bare-bones level, and while the U.S. was focused internally, the door opened for new powers to emerge on the world stage. In the wake of this power vacuum, China...
Hi, I'm George Foreman. Do you have an idea for a new product or invention? People ask me all the time, George, how do I get my idea in front of companies? How do I get a patent? What do I do next? Do you have the same questions? I'll tell you like I'll tell them all. Call my friends at InventHelp.
Call InventHelp today for free information. InventHelp can submit your invention to companies who are interested in receiving new ideas.
For your free inventor's information, call 1-800-441-7922. That's 1-800-441-7922.
Goldman Sachs and HSBC recently purchased 7.1 tons of physical gold. What do these bankers and mega money managers know that you don't? They're expecting the value of gold and silver to increase. That's why you need our friends at Capital Gold Group. Capital Gold Group offers gold and silver for direct delivery and will not be undersold. Call now. Call 1-800-932-4108. That is 1-800-932-4108. All right, guys, let me tell you about our friends at Capital Gold Group. Capital Gold Group is a company that deals with investing in precious metals such as gold and silver. They've been in business for over a decade and have an A-plus rating with the Better Business Bureau. They've been featured on Fox News, Market Watch, Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal, CNBC, Reuters, Fox Business, Financial Times, and Forbes magazine. If you're interested, you can call at 1-800-932-4108. That is 1-800-932-4108. They also offer various ebooks on investing in gold, such as the Definitive Gold Guide. So once again, if you're interested, you can call 1-800-932-4108. That's 1-800-932-4108. All right, guys, let me tell you about our friends at the Debt Ninja. The Debt Ninja is a company that specializes in slashing debt. They deal with various debt problems such as tax debt, debt settlement, debt consolidation, student loan debt, credit repair services, and bankruptcy. That is 1-800-826-1132. Now, their company, the Debt Ninja, operates on a national level and have worked to fight the IRS for many of their clients. If you're interested, you can call at 1-800-826-1132. That is 1-800-826-1132. Once again, that is 1-800-826-1132. Due to a decline in the economy and major car companies filing for bankruptcy, American Auto Protection has announced an extended service plan that is now available to the general public. This plan reduces the cost of auto repair expenses. Maximum Car Care was created to assist qualifying car owners with lowering repair bills of cars under 130,000 miles and under 12 years old. Maximum Car Care works to limit the expense of auto repair bills, roadside assistance, rental coverage, and towing. Their number is 1-800-824-9762. That is 1-800-824-9762. Once again, that is 1-800-824-9762. Maximum Car Care is a proud sponsor of the Caiden Cowger program.
You're listening to the WCNR News Network, where America comes to talk.
Caiden Cowger. Somebody had to say it.
Because I want you to understand this too, okay? I want you to understand this too. If I am reading a book like 1984, and I'm going page after page after page after page, and in my English class I have to compose a summary of 1984. If I write in my summary that there were dinosaurs in 1984, and I write a bunch of paragraphs about dinosaurs in 1984, you know what's going to happen? I'm going to get an F. Why is that? It's because I am inserting in my summary, in my interpretation of the book, in my summary of the book, things that are non-existent. It is an incorrect interpretation. If you are asked in your literature class to present the interpretation of a book, because oftentimes you are asked, what did the author mean by this? That is something very important to consider when presenting your interpretation. What did the author mean by this phrase, by this sentence, by this word? That is what you have to consider. The original intent of the book, of the author who wrote the book. If I write an essay and I have taken various words and have a distinct meaning, a very specific meaning in those words, somebody else, of course, can get a hold of that essay and read it and interpret it the exact opposite way that it was intended to be read. And why is that? It's because it involves twisting words. If I write an essay, my words have meaning. They are meant to be interpreted the way that I wrote them. If you have any type of legal document, that document has wording that is meant to be substantial, that is meant to be interpreted in a specific way. The Constitution is a legal document. It is not only a legal document, but it is the supreme law. What is a law? A legal document, okay? Just to clarify for some of you liberals out there. A legal document, a law is a legal document, okay? But here's the thing. What we are being told by liberal Democrats is that originalism is irrelevant. That the founding fathers did not intend to have any meaning to the words that they put into the Constitution. That the role of the Supreme Court is to socially evolve the culture, is to basically change the interpretation of the Constitution to match social norms. And that is not true. Overwhelmingly not true. The role of the Supreme Court is not to conform the Constitution to societal changes, but it is to interpret the Constitution as the words mean. For example, it's well known that I oppose abortion, okay? I overwhelmingly oppose abortion. Now, here's the thing. If I would be a justice serving on the Supreme Court, and liberal Democrats somehow, some way managed to pass a constitutional amendment stating that abortion cannot be regulated. Unfortunately, upon serving on the Supreme Court, if an amendment like that was passed, what would be the correct interpretation of that? It would be abortion cannot be regulated. It would be horrible. It would be a very difficult morally for me. But upon doing your job as a justice, that is very clearly what the Constitution would say. Does it say that? No. But I'm giving you an example. So in other words, a justice would have to interpret that as meaning, okay, it says that abortion cannot be regulated. Well, even though I am wholeheartedly, morally in objection to that, that is what it says. if the Constitution would say, for example, the Second Amendment would be changed, making it so no one has the right to bear arms, saying that it is illegal for any non-military personnel to own a firearm, and that's the exact wording in the Constitution. Guess what? That would mean that even though I feel personally that people should be allowed to own firearms, that's not what the Constitution says. So as a judge, I would have to rule no one can have a firearm, even though I am in objection to that politically, wholeheartedly. I'm trying to put that in a way for you liberals to understand. So if the Constitution says something that you are politically in opposition to, regardless of your political position, that does not mean that it should influence your interpretation of the Constitution, because there is a correct interpretation and then there is misinterpretation. And when you are trying to change and twist the words of that document to conform to your own political opinion, you are misinterpreting it. The original intent, the wording of an author is important when creating a summary. What did the author mean by that? That is an important thing to consider when reading literature. And it is an important thing to consider when reading the Constitution. What did the authors mean by that? That's what originalism is. We use originalism every day when reading literature, and we don't even know it. Liberals use originalism upon reading literature, and they don't even know it. What we are saying as originalists is to apply the same standards to the Constitution as you would apply to reading a book. What did the author mean by this? What did the authors mean by writing the Constitution? What did George Orwell mean by writing 1984? That would just be like me saying 1984 was not a book written in opposition to big government, to a surveillance state. 1984 was written as a guide. Yeah, okay. No, that is a misinterpretation. You don't understand what it meant. Why? Because you completely ignored the author's intent. Well, when you misinterpret the Constitution and you say that it's flexible, you say that that it's expandable, that it is this form of elastic, that it's a broad meaning behind the wording, you're saying that the author's original intent behind writing those words is insignificant. Now, the founders did expect that there would be societal changes, but I'm going to tell you, if the societal change is so massive, that's why we have an amendment process. Because if it was such a great societal change as the liberals like to say exists, then they should be able to pass a constitutional amendment just like that. But the thing is that there isn't a massive societal change as liberals want. There aren't enough votes to pass their little amendments because there isn't such a massive societal change in existence. And that's why they like using judicial activism, judicial tyranny, to get what they want done. They can't do it legislatively, so they go through the courts. That is not what you do in a democratic system. That is not what you do in the United States of America. That is not the original intent of the Founding Fathers. That is not the role of the Supreme Court. That is tyranny. And that is exactly what liberals are engaging in. They are not engaging in interpretation. They are engaging in the twisting of words. They are twisting the supreme law. They are twisting the Constitution into their own meaning rather than the meaning that it was meant to have. And then when you call them out on it, they get upset, they get mad, they throw their little temper tantrums. But those of you who are able to understand that upon reading any type of literature, you should always consider the original intent of the author. You understand that in order to understand the meaning of words, the meaning of sentences, the meaning of phrases, you have to understand the way that it was meant to be read with any piece of literature.
Caiden Cowger. Keeping America straight.
You're listening to Caiden Cowger on the WCNR News Network.
Caiden Cowger. Somebody had to say it.
It safely eliminates stress and anxiety. It makes commuting, driving your kids around, or driving a truck more fun. It makes gift shopping easier. It's Happy Driving Stress Reduction, a revolutionary patent-pending tool that works while you drive. Find Happy Driving Stress Reduction on iTunes, Amazon, or Google Play. Make life easier. Buy Happy Driving Stress Reduction today.
You always want to look your best, but you don't always have time to deal with a necktie that won't cooperate. That's where we come in. Introducing the Never Tie, the only necktie that you never have to tie. Each Never Tie comes with a tie and 2 removable knots that you simply slide on and adjust for your comfort, giving you the perfect look every time. Choose from over 20 stylish designs at thenevertie.com. Enter promo code RADIO1 for discount.
Go get your copy of Prelude to World War III, The Rise of Islamic Republic and the Rebirth of America. World War III Series Volume 1, available in paperback and Kindle edition on Amazon by the authors James Rozone and Miranda Watson. By the 2020s, America was no longer a world superpower. The military had been cut to a bare-bones level, and while the U.S. was focused internally, the door opened for new powers to emerge on the world stage. In the wake of this power vacuum, China.
Hi, I'm George Foreman. Do you have an idea for a new product or invention? People ask me all the time, George, how do I get my idea in front of companies? How do I get a patent? What do I do next? Do you have the same questions? I'll tell you like I'll tell them all. Call my friends at InventHelp.
Call InventHelp today for free information. InventHelp can submit your invention to companies who are interested in receiving new ideas.
For your free inventor's information, call 1-800-441-7922. That's 1-800-441-7922.
Goldman Sachs and HSBC recently purchased 7.1 tons of physical gold. What do these bankers and mega money managers know that you don't? They're expecting the value of gold and silver to increase. That's why you need our friends at Capital Gold Group. Capital Gold Group offers gold and silver for direct delivery and will not be undersold. Call now. Call 1-800-932-4108. That is 1-800-932-4108. All right, guys, let me tell you about our friends at Capital Gold Group. Capital Gold Group is a company that deals with investing in precious metals such as gold and silver. They've been in business for over a decade and have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. They've been featured on Fox News, Market Watch, Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal, CNBC, Reuters, Fox Business, Financial Times, and Forbes magazine. If you're interested, you can call at 1-800-932-4108. That is 1-800-932-4108. They also offer various ebooks on investing in gold, such as the Definitive Gold Guide. So once again, if you're interested, you can call 1-800-932-4108. That's 1-800-932-4108. All right, guys, let me tell you about our friends at the Debt Ninja. The Debt Ninja is a company that specializes in slashing debt. They deal with various debt problems such as tax debt, debt settlement, debt consolidation, student loan debt, credit repair services, and bankruptcy. That is 1-800-826-1132. Now, their company, the Debt Ninja, operates on a national level and have worked to fight the IRS for many of their clients. If you're interested, you can call at 1-800-826-1132. That is 1-800-826-1132. Once again, that is 1-800-826-1132. Due to a decline in the economy and major car companies filing for bankruptcy, American Auto Protection has announced an extended service plan that is now available to the general public. This plan reduces the cost of auto repair expenses. Maximum Car Care was created to assist qualifying car owners with lowering repair bills of cars under 130,000 miles and under 12 years old. Maximum Car Care works to limit the expense of auto repair bills, roadside assistance, rental coverage, and towing. Their number is 1-800-824-9762. That is 1-800-824-9762. Once again, that is 1-800-824-9762. Maximum Car Care is a proud sponsor of the Caiden Cowger program.
You're listening to the WCNR News Network, where America comes to talk.
Caiden Cowger. Somebody had to say it.
So how am I doing, guys? I've been thinking deeply about a lot of this stuff because it's something that really needs to be expressed more thoroughly. It's something that really needs to be addressed. Originalism is simply just the interpretation of a piece of literature. That's all that it is. If I would open up this book... Okay, here, I have my old book. Let me grab it here. Oh, far away. Okay, there I grabbed it. All right. So, let me find a phrase in here, okay? This was the book that I wrote when I was little. I need to edit this thing. Let me see. Okay, so if I am going through here, and I'll just try this. I'll read the first paragraph here on the War on Wealth, Chapter 7 of Restoring America. The president, as well as many liberals, try to make the rich look like a greedy group of heartless fat cats. In many cases, the stereotype is not true. Most larger businesses that have over 500 employees are owned by people that make over $200,000 per year. People who are rich have to pay salaries, taxes, and insurance coverage on their employees, taxes on their products, and taxes on their buildings and factories. After that, they get the rest, which for many small business owners does not leave very much to meet their other business expenses and provide for their families. If liberals got their way, rich people's taxes would be raised just because they make a good amount of money. Liberals only look at their gross amount of income without looking at their expenses. They do not get all the money that they make. If we raise taxes only on the wealthy, then some of them would not have enough money to pay for their employees. So basically, then it says this would lead to workers being laid off, which would lead to higher unemployment. So here's the thing. That was just a small paragraph from the War on Wealth. Okay, so basically what I was saying in that paragraph was that the rich people, of course, are not taxed enough. That's what I concluded out of that paragraph. Rich people are not taxed enough and they need to be taxed more. Now, what was that? Whoa! What was that? Where did that interpretation come from? It's not true. That's not what I meant. What did the author mean by that? The author meant that rich people are being taxed too much. Okay, they pay for 85% of all, the top 25% of income earners pay 85% of all taxes. So what's the author meaning by that? I'm your author. What did the author mean by that little phrase? He meant that rich people are taxed enough already, that the solution is not taxing the rich more, but it is lowering taxes across the board. So that was the original intent of yours truly. Now, if someone else interprets it the opposite way, that, well, based upon what he was saying, rich people aren't taxed enough, the author didn't mean for that to have, No, that was an incorrect interpretation. Why? Because I was presenting an argument that rich people are taxed too much. Everybody is taxed too much. Taxation is theft. No, no, that is the truth. I mean, that's the original intent of yours truly. That people are taxed enough the way that it is. Okay? So if you interpret that in any other way, your interpretation is wrong. Why? Because you're considering the way that I feel, the way that I believe, the way that I look at things. Because that was written by me, meaning that you are to consider how I feel on the issue when reading that paragraph. Okay? So that's what I'm saying. A lot of these liberals, when interpreting the Constitution, do not take into account the way that the founders meant for the supreme law to be interpreted. They don't believe that that is important. Many of them failed English. I'm sure of it. But there was an article that was even in The Hill, and it was written by a guy with the name of Brian A. Garner. He's an opinion contributor. And he said that critics of originalism don't know their history or the founding fathers. And it's true. They're saying the history is irrelevant. And that's why we are doomed to repeat it if we ever get people like that in a majority position. But anyway, guys, I want to thank you for listening to us. For more information on the Caiden Cowger program, go to CaidenCowgerProgram.com. And for the latest news exposing the left, go to CowgerNation.com. Thank you, God bless, and God save this nation.